Okay, peeps, welcome back. So, we're going to talk about the Bitcoin miners today and also Bitcoin and how the miners are just absolutely popping off, as you guys can see here. Plus, we're going to cover our own personal holdings. So, with that being said, let's get it. So, first thing I'm going to go over here is the personal holdings. As you guys can see, we have a bunch of covered calls here. They are written extremely far out in time. We're still kind of experimenting with how this whole thing works. But based on, and we'll go over this later this weekend, but based on all these covered calls, as of right now, we've collected roughly, I think it's like roughly about 3,000 or so in premiums. Not exactly sure how much exactly. It might be a little bit more than that. So basically, we wrote all these covered calls, or I should say, rolled the dates out in time on HUT8, CIFR, BTBT. We then used the premium from that to buy 200 shares of RIOT, which we wrote more covered calls on, and then we used a piece of that money to buy another 200 shares of BTBT, which is kind of how we got to all these options trades here. So as you guys can see here, we have 300 shares of HUT8, 800 shares of BTBT, 300 shares of CIFR. And RIOT is, we have 200 shares of this, but this is kind of more of an options play, not so much a crypto play. Although, of course, if RIOT does like an 8x or something like that, and we are able to cash out at the top, we're not going to be mad about that. So just kind of taking a look at these real quick. They had a massively green day after the Fed basically came out and said, yeah, we're not going to cut rates. The markets loved it. They were soaking it up. And as you guys can see here, we're massively in profit, $250 on HUD8. Average cost is $8.55. We'll go down here a little bit, take a look at BTBT. I believe BTBT also had earnings today. We'll go over that as well. So BTBT, massive rip to the upside. We went from being down pretty substantially in pre-market. As you guys can see, average cost $263. Pre-market, the price was just above $2. Now we're at break even on 800 shares with a lot of upside to go. So that's definitely a good place to be, I would say. And we'll take a look at CIFR now. So this one's massively in the money. It just recently had earnings not that long ago, and it was very bullish. So we're about $1.20 a share in profit, $363, as you guys can see right there. And one of the other reasons we bought RIOT was not just for the crypto exposure and the options premiums, but also we're going to take a look at this in a minute. It is in the buy zone currently. So that's another reason why we bought it. As you guys can see, literally right after we bought this thing, I'm not even kidding, literally right after we bought this morning, the FOMC happened and then this. So we're up another $218 on this thing, basically since the pretty much about the market open. So we got in somewhere like around here, 7:30-ish, shortly after the open. And then, of course, the FOMC happened and pretty much the rest is history after that. So why exactly our shares haven't gotten called away yet, don't know. We'll just have to figure that out later. So anyways, getting into the content here. So BTBT, the buy zone is still between $155 to $2, $423 to $480, all the way up to $530 a share is obviously your resistance. So I would say it's about as good a time as any to pick these shares up. I mean, it's a pretty decent drop to get into that buy zone, but we didn't even go in there. So if you bought in now, which is up to you, it'd be about 67 to 89. And then, I mean, you could be taking a look at as much as probably about 110% on this move. Again, I did say before that I think it's not going to get back down below these candles here because this is major support at the top of the zone. It did respect that on this recent move. So now going down to the 4-hourly time frame, you guys can see that not only did we have a bullish FOMC reaction from the markets today, but we also had earnings on this. So there was a beat on earnings on BTBT. So now we're going to move on to CIFR. Looking back in time, you guys can see that they had earnings. It was also a massive beat on CIFR, so that's very good. A lot of people probably thought that these Bitcoin miners probably were not going to make any money. I mean, guys, Bitcoin generally only goes in one direction, that's up. So I'm pretty sure the miners are going to find a way to make money. I wouldn't doubt it for a second. So we were kind of giving you guys the buy signals back here. Whether you chose to pick up in any of this area on CIFR or not is up to you. So we are approaching the resistance zone. I would say BTBT is more of a buy than CIFR at this point. CIFR is already moving up, but just so y'all know, the support is between 215 to 265. Resistance roughly about $5 to $5.50 per share. So from this point to resistance, you could be looking at about 6 to 22%. From where we got in, so about average of 330 per share, it's a total of about 47 to 67%. And from this buy zone down here, assuming it does go back down there, which keep in mind, this is crypto, that could happen. So it'd be anywhere from 95 to about 123%. So HUD 8, this one, let's actually see if we had any earnings recently. So earnings are coming up. I mean, if BTBT and CIFR have been profitable, my guess is HUD 8 is probably also going to be profitable because it's a bigger company than BTBT and CIFR. That's, of course, just my estimation. So earnings on the 28th of this month, that's about a week from now. So we're still in the buy zone as far as technicals are concerned. We're still very, very cheap on HUD 8. We still have to break this downtrend line, and we're not even close to the resistance. So support between roughly about $3.50 to $9. Resistance is $17.30 to $22.50. I would say it's probably not going to go below this area here at about this $7-ish area because we've had multiple weeks now where it's held above that steadily. So assuming you wanted to get in now, which is, again, entirely up to you, we'd be looking at roughly about a 91% gain to as high as potentially 153% on this. So RIOT, again, we're showing you guys the reason why we got in. So our average cost basis was like 17 something. Again, it's below the EMAs, which indicates it could potentially be a good time to pick up the dip. We didn't pick up back here, and that's fine. Again, our entries are not going to be perfect. It just kind of is what it is. But if you also look at this trend line we have here, there's another thing I want to point out, a reason why we had this bounce. So looking at it from a technical perspective, it was likely it wasn't really going any lower than this 1050 area. So our entry of 11, whatever it was, 1150, 1170, something like that, is pretty good as far as I'm concerned. So support is roughly about $8.50 to $10.20. Resistance is $18.80 to about $21. So if you wanted to get in now, which is up to you, you'd be looking at about a 50 to potentially as high as a nearly 70% gain. If you wanted to get in now and DCA all the way down into the support, which may or may not happen, it's anywhere from 104 to as high as 128%. So going over to the 4-hourly chart, you guys can see that we had earnings, kind of a mixed bag on RIOT, as you can see here, missed on revenue, but a gain on the earnings piece. So mixed bag. We kind of popped up, and then we had the sell-off, of course, because we were hitting resistance. So in my opinion, the sell-off didn't really have a whole lot to do with earnings. That's just my opinion, of course. But as you guys can see, we kind of had this triple top here with these wicks. So that's a very bearish sign. Now we're bouncing off support. So Mara, lovely Mara, everybody talks about this one. This is apparently the stock market's favorite crypto pick, Mara. So we had a bounce almost perfectly off of support here. As you guys can see, this kind of tweezer bottom formation here, that's a very bullish sign. And we're bouncing off of both the blue and the yellow EMAs in convergence with the support zone. That's very bullish. So support is between $18.20 to about $20. Resistance is $29.20 to about $34. So if we do the measure move from where it is currently, it's about a 30 to roughly about, I'd say, a 50% gain. If you wanted to wait for it to get back into support, which it recently was at support, not sure it's going to go back down there after this point, but we'll see. It'd be about 52 to, I'd say, roughly about 77%. So still pretty good for being the biggest Bitcoin miner in the United States. So they had earnings recently as well. Of course, they beat. That's to be expected from the biggest miner on the market. So BitF, this is one we are covering by request. So it just bounced out of the support zone. Support is between $2 and $2.30 per share. Resistance is between $3 and $3.60, all the way up to that wick there, $3.90. We did bounce off of the EMAs, which is currently sitting right around this support area. So that's something to keep in mind. That's typically a very strong signal of support. So if you get it now, you'd be looking at about 20 to 58%. If you got in the zone, it'd be anywhere from 36 to about 75, maybe up to 80%. So that covers the miners. Now let's go ahead and get into Bitcoin. So if I can actually find Bitcoin, give me a second. Okay, so Bitcoin. As you guys can see, we clearly bounced very strongly off that $60,000 level. I think it was partly technicals that did this and also partly probably the FOMC. So it does appear that it does want to hold this box, at least as of right now, as support. We'll see how the week ends. But we have not had a death cross on the MACD. So as of right now, I would say it's difficult to say whether this is going to break back up bullish or not. There's two potential scenarios that could play out here. We could either just go straight into the bull run, immediately at the time of the halving or even shortly after the halving, and then roughly about a year from that point. So somewhere between a year from now until a year from May of this year, just an estimate, could be the peak of the bull run. Or what could happen is we could kind of chop down and sideways or something like that, or even have a larger retracement. Down and sideways while the EMAs move up would be the most bullish scenario because that'd be minimal downward price movement. A major pullback would be a good dip buying opportunity, but that means that the downtrend would also take less time to play out. So if the second scenario plays out, then it's possible we may not start the bull run until the end of the year, which generally lines up with history. So anyways, let's take a look at these indicators. So the Google trends for the 5-year is a little bit elevated, but again, nowhere near the peak. So that indicates to me that we still have a great deal of room to run up in Bitcoin and crypto. We are clearly not at the top. As you guys can see, this 100 over here and this 70 over here, it's a pretty clear indication of the top. So Bitcoin at a 41 currently, but again, nowhere near these cycle highs up here. You can see it's an 80 to 100. So that indicates we still have more room to go. Fear and greed, this is a little bit more bearish. So we've been in the greed and extreme greed territory for some time now. So we have been telling you guys for weeks that a pullback is possible. To be honest, I was kind of expecting it to be a little bit more extreme than this. So we may have more room to run down, but we may not. I don't know. With the spot Bitcoin ETFs in play, that kind of changes things a little bit. So we'll just kind of have to keep an eye out on that. MVRV, it is a little bit elevated, but nowhere near the top. As you guys can see here, the last peak was like almost at a 7, and then you have like a 9.5, 9, and a 10 or something like that. So we're way, way far away, much higher to go up on the MVRV. Bitcoin rainbow chart, still very cheap, I would say. It's in the accumulate zone. So in order, if this thing does top out, let's say it's sometime around, it's hard to pinpoint this thing exactly. So sometime around, just kind of get it to move back a little bit. We'll say it kind of peaks around the same zone that it did before, or actually let's go even lower and be even more conservative. So just assume that this thing tops out in July of next year, which again would be roughly about a year and 2 months from May of this year. You still be looking at nearly $160,000 Bitcoin. Of course, it could go higher. That could be anyone's guess. Obviously, the peak, the absolute top, like super overbought would be 540,000 here. Don't know that it's going to go that high, but we've already gone over the fib retracements. So anyways, 30 days to go on the Bitcoin halving. That is the major indicator that usually sends the price of Bitcoin higher. We've already had the supply shock with the ETFs buying up all the Bitcoin. This would be that was the demand shock. This would be the supply shock when Bitcoin gets its rewards cut in half. So now we'll take a look at the new bull. So net unrealized profit loss, this thing's pretty overextended. This would indicate to me that there is a possibility that there may be a pullback coming. Again, generally speaking, smart money likes to buy when Bitcoin pulls back. They like to sell when Bitcoin goes up. Okay, and retail does the opposite. When retail buys, they buy as it's going up, and then they sell as it's going down. Not always the case. Sometimes they hold as it's going down. It kind of depends. But when this thing goes up, the higher that it goes up, the more bearish it becomes, or the more overbought it becomes. So there's a higher risk of a major pullback. Now, if we'll take a look at just a few other indicators. So the Bitcoin high cycle top, as we show you guys this every single time we make a video on this. So this has marked nearly every single peak ever in Bitcoin's history. Okay. I mean, we could zoom out and show you guys here, but these are the previous peaks here. It showed pi cycle top indicators, one for 2017, one on the first peak of 2021. So 4 out of 5 times this has been accurate. It has an 80% accuracy rating as of basically current day. So no pi cycle top indicator, no MACD death cross, which would be another major signal of a bear market to come. No close below the EMAs. That would also be another major warning sign. And no close below the monthly trend line. As we told you guys before, whenever this happens, that indicates the start of a bear market, and it's been a very, very accurate way to indicate whether we're in a bear market or a bull market. And again, the trend line is still sitting roughly around that support zone, so there is a risk of a major pullback here, but we really don't know what's going to happen yet, okay? Either it's going to get rejected, come back, try to retest the top of the zone, and then sell off, which we have 11 days left in the month. Of course, this could play out on a weekly too, and then we could go back down to these EMAs in the zone or somewhere in this area, or we break out, come back, test as support, and then bounce from there. We'll just kind of have to let you guys know how this plays out according to what the charts are telling us. So anyways, this is the Bitcoin miner stocks and Bitcoin. Hope you all enjoyed this content. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and we will see y'all later. Peace.